Sean McCourt, what are you doing on my screen?
David, how are you?
Good, sir. Good, sir. Thanks for taking the time with me today. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely, man. It's good to see you again. We have a lot to catch up on.
We do. I mean, I haven't seen you in what, 2 weeks?
Been 2 weeks. Yeah, a lot has happened.
So, so, so Sean and I have known each other for a long time. I think we met probably 15 years ago or so. We're friends in all fairness, full disclosure. He's my buddy. And he was a client for a period of time as well. And right now he's retired. I think I don't even think he's 50 years old yet. And he sold his
Temporarily retired.
temporarily retired. Unemployed. Can I call you unemployed?
Yeah, sure.
And I'll let you fill in the gaps here, Sean. But Sean sold his company in the summer of 2022. He officially exited in February. He built I don't want to call it an IT staffing company because it's probably more of a business management consulting company that did contract staffing. I'll let him fill in the blanks on that. But we're here to kind of talk about how he did it, what got him through it, where he's at today, where he came from, and all that stuff. So, Sean, I'm going to need your help as we get through this thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Do you want to start with where I'm at today?
yeah, like what? Yeah, I mean, tell everybody what the company was and what it did, and then how you got to where you're at today. What's going on today?
Sure, sure. So we basically built a consulting company that had two components to it. One was an executive search business where we were placing technology executives, retained type searches, placing CIOs, CTOs, CISOs, that sort of thing. And then the other component was the consulting arm where we were doing kind of project-based staff aug. So it was more high level, a lot of ERP implementations. We did a lot in the life sciences space, so a lot of like clinical systems implementations, drug discovery systems implementations, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then sold the company about a year and a half ago, stayed on with them to kind of help manage the integration, and then resigned right around the holidays. And I ended up finishing about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And now I'm bored out of my mind, which is why I'm here talking to you. I've got nothing else to do.
I definitely want to get into that, by the way, because you're one of a handful of people that I know and that I'm actively talking to that are in your situation. You obviously built something that was worth a lot of money. You sold it. You're at a point in your life where you're at a point that a lot of people probably wish they were at. But there is downside to having that type of flexibility and, hey, what do I do with myself? And I want to get your take on all those things. But tell me a little bit about how you got into it and why you started your own business. But maybe even before that, I know you, but tell me what you were like before I knew you. What was it like growing up? Where did you grow up? What was your family like? What did you like to do? All that stuff.
This could go pretty deep. But yeah, I grew up in New Jersey, a town called Teaneck, which is just right outside of Manhattan. It was, yeah, I had a great mom and dad. At the time I didn't realize it, but looking back on it, especially now having 3 kids of my own, you kind of get to reflect on, the quality of parents that you had. And I think I was very, very fortunate. I had, an incredible mother and father that were there and they were present the whole time. We had plenty of dysfunction as every family does, but I had a pretty good upbringing. It was kind of a lower middle class type of upbringing. And when I wanted to get out of New Jersey, so I left high school, went to college up in Rhode Island, went to college for 4 years, but didn't quite make it out. So technically, I don't think I have a degree yet. But after 4 years at college in Rhode Island, I figured, all right, that's enough. And I came up to Boston and just got a job, started working in IT recruiting. And I was lucky enough I got hired by an incredible guy. He was one of the first people I called when I sold the company, a guy named Steve Thomas, who just taught me the right way to do this job. He taught me the right way to sell. He just gave me like an incredible foundation to build off of.
Yep.
And that's kind of how I started my recruiting and staffing career back in '97 or so.
Did you know Steve before you took that job, or did you randomly apply to a job?
Yeah, no, I was looking through was it the Big Help? Remember the Sunday Globe? I think it was called the Big Help.
Yeah.
but I was looking through the jobs in the Sunday Globe one day, and I called him. I called a bunch of places. He was one of them, and I didn't know what recruiting was. But he said, "Hey, when can you come out for an interview?" And I said, "I can jump on the green line right now, and I can be there in 2 hours." And
Yeah.
he kind of liked that go-getter type of mentality. So he picked me up at the green line stop out in Newton,
Yeah.
and we had the first interview in his car in the parking lot at the green line.
No kidding. What year was
Yeah,
this? What year was this?
that was '97.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's when I got into it. It's funny. I had just moved back from Florida and I was sitting on my couch desperately wanting to get out of the mortgage industry. And my sister cut out an ad in the Boston Globe and she handed it to me. She said, she goes, why don't you stop sitting around here feeling bad for yourself and go interview somewhere else? And it was an ad for a company called Cotelligent, and they were a staffing company. And same with me. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what staffing was. I had no idea what IT was. And then I ended up interviewing there, and 13 years later, I was still there, and then ultimately went on to do other things. But it's so funny how you just stumbled upon it as well. So, what are some of the things that you learned back then that applied to you? And I'm going to be all over the place in this conversation, but when you think about what you learned in 97 when you got into the business, how much of that still applied in 2012 when you started your company, and how much of it still applies today?
Yeah, I mean, God, I'd say most of it. I'd say the core characteristics of what made me successful in '97 compared to what made me successful in 2015 are similar. And I think those are the core characteristics that my parents instilled in me, partly through a level of neglect, healthy neglect, I should say. Um, because when I was brought up, they didn't give me money, they didn't give me anything. They gave me food, they gave me shelter. Anything else I wanted, I had to figure it out.
Yeah.
And I think that was a very healthy way of raising me. So from a young age, back in high school, I used to sell hockey cards to make money and go to like trade shows with my friends and kind of trade and barter hockey cards, and anything I could do to just kind of make money, I was doing. So I was hustling at a very young age, and I think that hustle is really that's one of the keys to you know any kind of sales role. And recruiting is no different. I think
Right.
I've had to hustle kind of my whole life, and when you get knocked down and you get the no, you just keep going, and you don't
Right.
let anything stand in your way.
So an element of resilience and hustle is absolutely important. And maybe that was just your conditioning along the way. Like you said, your parents just didn't hand you things on a silver platter. You had to go earn them.
Yeah.
What are some other things though back then that you might not have known going in that you learned, say in that first year, as a salesperson in the staffing industry, that this is what it takes to be successful. I'm going to have to do this.
I mean, the biggest thing is how to sell. How to sell in my mind the right way. Steve, my boss at the time, he taught me that selling is not about closing the deal. It's not about figuring out like what do I need to say to get this person to sign on the dotted line. Selling is about building relationships and really building meaningful relationships with people. Sales is about prospecting really well. Who am I trying to get in front of? Who is my target audience? And then how do I get in front of them? How do I give them an opportunity to get to know who I am so that I can get to know who they are? Um, and then, business just kind of was a byproduct of me selling that way, of me being able to build meaningful relationships with the right audience.
So about 12 years into your staffing career, you decided that you wanted to take a swing at it on your own.
Yeah, a little more than 12. I opened Longford in 2012.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
yeah, 15 years into it.
so 15 years. So, okay. I thought you started at 97. So 15 years into it. I mean, math is
Yeah,
off. My
it's
math,
it's arithmetic. We'll get there.
scary. I graduated from college and I still can't figure it
you,
out. So
you see, you did it all wrong. You should have just left after 4 years with no
I,
diploma.
such a
You'd be able
waste
to
of
do
money.
basic arithmetic.
Oh man, it's embarrassing. What a waste of money. Okay. So 15 years, my correction, my mistake. So 15 years out, you said, I want to do this on my own. And I knew you back then. I remember when you did this. What compelled you to say, I want to give this a shot?
I'd always wanted to do it, and I had always talked about doing it. And my wife at the time, I was talking about it for years, and I remember saying like, Catherine, one day I'm gonna just go out on my own. And she was like, yeah, you should totally do it. And then, years went by and I'm like, yeah, one of these days I'm gonna go out on my own.
Yeah.
And finally she said, like, will you just stop it? Like, you're being a, you know what,
Yeah.
like, just do it. Like, you can do it.
Right.
And she kind of gave me, it was a little bit of a slap in the face where I realized when she said something to me that like the only thing that was holding me back was that I was scared. I was scared of not having a safety net,
Yeah.
scared of failing, scared of so many different things. But really, the only thing that was there when I really kind of analyzed, like, all right, what's the difference between success and failure if I do this? The only thing holding me back was fear.
Yep. Yep.
Once I realized that, I was like, all right, this is not a good enough reason for me not to do it.
Do you remember the day where you decided today's the day I'm in?
Uh, you know what? I don't. I remember giving my notice. I worked for another great boss at the time, Kip Hollister, who I had a lot of respect for. And I remember going in and, resigning and crying. And yeah, I'm a very emotional guy to begin with. But, yeah, it was tough, because it was leaving a place I had been at for 8 years. And I had a really great experience there and a great mentor in Kip.
Right.
But it was also like that definitive moment where it was like, there's no turning back.
Yep. Yep. And had you already thought through the plan, or were you now in a position where you had to go figure it out?
I had an idea around the plan. I didn't really want to spend too much time kind of honing in on the details, but I had an idea of the direction I wanted to go.
Yeah.
And it was really in line with what I had always done throughout my career. I knew I wanted to build, an IT search and consulting business that focused on getting in front of IT executives and building meaningful relationships and really kind of providing quality service.
Right. Right. How important is knowing what you want to do um, at that level? How important was that to your success?
It was pretty important. Looking back on it, I'd say it was pretty important. I was very clear from day one. It wasn't, and when I gave my notice, I wasn't necessarily clear, but once I gave my notice and I was kind of, there was no turning back, that's when the game plan became very clear to me.
Yep.
And before I made that very first phone call, like I knew exactly what I wanted to build.
Yep.
I didn't necessarily know what the journey was going to look like over the next 10 years, but I had an idea of like what the end game was going to look like and what type of business I wanted to build. And I didn't quite know how I was going to get there,
Yep.
but I
Did
kind
you
of,
go ahead? I'm sorry, I cut you off
I was
there.
going to say, I had a tremendous amount of faith in the fact that this was the right business to build and that I would get to the end zone
Yeah.
um, at some point.
Did you ever write it down?
Not really. I mean, a little bit. I put together a business plan, but it wasn't a super detailed business plan. It didn't necessarily. I had like financial projections, year one, year two, year three.
Yeah.
Which helped.
Yeah.
And I ended up, coming fairly close to those projections.
Yeah.
For year one, year two, year three.
And I want to go back and forth. I certainly want to get. I want to walk through your experience with Longford. I also want to. I'm curious to get your take on your perspective of sales since I've known you has pretty much been the same. You've always been a relationship driven person. I've never known you not to be. And you probably were back in 97 and you certainly are today. I think about my own path. I like to think of myself as relationship driven, and I was even early, but I will say there was much more of a transactional component to the way I closed business and before I opened my own company. And once it was my own, there was just this, it was almost like this liberating feeling that it can be whatever I want it to be. And it almost evolved into a much more consultative process than it ever was before it was my own. I'm just curious on your end, did you become different when it became your own, or were you the same guy?
I think I'd probably agree with you. I think I was more consultative. Uh, I think, when you're working for somebody else, you've got metrics you need to hit and numbers you need to hit and pressure.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing. I think that's all good stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there was a difference in terms of, I don't know, to use like a golf analogy, sometimes you hold the club too tight,
Yeah.
and the tension just causes you to take a bad swing.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes I would hold the club too tight, and I'd want to close a deal. I needed to close a deal to hit a certain number.
Yeah.
And when I was on my own, I didn't feel that pressure.
Yeah.
I mean, there's different pressure, obviously, to
Yeah.
pay your mortgage,
Sure.
stuff like that. But I also, I just trusted. I still to this day have an unwavering faith and trust in the process in which I sell, in which I develop business and build relationships. And my feeling again is if I prospect correctly, then I'm going to get business. And it's more, I can certainly manage like my metrics around how many people, how many prospects am I getting in front of. But if I just have meaningful conversations with people, business is going to come.
Right. And you have to trust yourself, though, that you have to trust the value that you bring to the table. And you have to have some sort of trust in your level of competence, I would think, in order for confident prospecting.
Yeah. I remember sitting down in Franklin one day with you in one of those classes, and you asked, what does prospecting mean? Give me a definition for prospecting. And I just kind of like had a blackout moment where I was like, prospecting is the process in which you identify potential customers for the goods or services you sell. And like, I still feel like that's really all it is. Like if you prospect well throughout my career, it's been selling IT services, right? Every CIO out there has X amount of millions of dollars in contract technology spend, that they are going to use that year. So our job is not to sit here and talk them into like taking a person, for a certain project. It's just like they're going to spend the money with somebody. The only question is it going to be you or is it going to be another person?
Right. Right.
So my job was always just to get in front of these people, build relationships, and put myself or my firm in a position where we can really provide a good service.
So talk to me about the first year. You get started. Here you are. You have a company, Longford and Company. Here it is. And how does that first year go? What was that like building it from nothing?
I was sitting in my bedroom, not too much different than what I'm doing right now. And I just started making calls. I had a non-compete, which I honored because I didn't want to like screw around, and I certainly didn't want to get into any kind of legal battles. So I just started, cold calling, working my network. I broke into Ironwood Pharmaceuticals, was my first client, and did one search for them and got a consultant in there. And I remember the consultant. I met him out somewhere because I didn't want to bring him in my bedroom. And the first question he asked, he was like, "Are you going to be able to pay me?" And I had to explain to him how I had set up the organization and the payroll, and basically kind of opened up the doors to show him that here's how you're going to get paid, and here's how I've kind of taken that risk off the table.
Wow. You had already thought through that. So you weren't figuring that out as you went. Those things were in place. That's a big
absolutely.
deal. That's a big deal if you're putting contractors to work, is floating that payroll until you get paid, right?
Yeah, it's huge because God forbid I get a project where I need to put 10 people out, in the next week or two, I'm not getting paid from the client for 60 days, and I've got to pay these people every week. So yeah, that's a huge deal. So I went to a factoring company that I knew, and I set that all up so that I didn't have any payroll issues. I outsourced almost everything that I was doing. Benefits I had all set up and ready to go, but that was outsourced. Payroll, collections, invoicing, everything. So all I had to do was every day wake up and just try and put business together and build relationships.
At what point did you realize you need more people to help?
It was after about year one. I got an office space, hired a recruiter. Maybe year one, year two, probably about a year and a half, I think, is when I hired my first recruiter. And that allowed me to I think I had about 10 or 12 consultants out billing at the time.
Yeah.
And I was already starting to feel like I can't keep juggling both sides of this.
Yeah.
So I hired a recruiter who is still with the company, and she's been fantastic. And then organically, as I hit 20 consultants out, bring on another recruiter, 30 consultants, bring on a salesperson, I just kind of organically kept growing it that way.
Was that the math problem that you made up as you went along, or did you think?
I just made that up.
Did you?
I did look at, I obviously looked at a combination of, the balance sheet and how much cash I have there, as well as the P&L and what like the receivables look like coming in.
Yeah.
So I could kind of project out what type of income was going to be coming in over the next, quarter.
Yeah.
And then that would allow me to feel comfortable committing this type of salary and benefits to a full-time hire.
Yeah. Yeah. How did you ultimately decide on the type of person you hired? Not what they did, but the DNA of the individual. How did you feel confident in your ability to make the choice on people?
With that first person that I hired, she had been out of work for 10 years. She was a stay-at-home mom, and she was in technology recruiting before that, for probably about 5 or 6 years. So she had some experience, but it was certainly dated technology that she'd been recruiting for. But at the time, I'm like, well, who the hell's going to come to work for me? And she was thinking, well, who the hell's going to hire me? And when we met, it just kind of, she had the hustle. She had the reason to like work hard. She had, 3 kids, some life situations she was dealing with. And I've always just looked for people that know how to hustle and know how to work hard and have been working hard their whole lives.
And she was with you the whole time
Yeah.
from that point on.
Yeah.
I think the stay-at-home mom slash parent is a secret weapon.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when you think about that, from raising 3 kids yourself, you think about raising children, it's like your ability to, or your necessity to multitask, to
Yeah.
manage a million different things. Uh, yeah, so when you've got somebody who's been a stay-at-home mom, the life skills they've learned over the course of that time are phenomenal. So they come in and they don't have time to mess around. They don't have time to sit there and chit chat by the water cooler. Like they are coming in, they are working their butts off and getting a lot done. They're highly productive.
I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that. So every 10 heads that you put out to work, you were pretty much hiring a recruiter or a salesperson to help augment the team and help you get things done. Any doubts along the way? As you go through, did you ever have doubt that, oh my God, is this thing going to keep going? Is this, can I continue to do this? Or what do I do now? Did you ever have any of those early on where you wondered whether or not this was a sustainable business?
I always knew that it was sustainable, and I had the good fortune of seeing it done in the past, right? Like it's not like I went out and, built some company that was totally out of the realm of my expertise.
Right.
Like what I built is everything I've always done in my career. So I'd seen it built successfully before, and I knew that success was kind of inevitable.
Yeah.
But there were definitely a lot of moments that came up where I was like, I don't, do I spend this kind of money on this person? They want, 100K base salary. Like, can I afford that? Is that crazy?
Right.
There were plenty of those moments where I don't know. I just I think you just have to kind of take a risk every now and then and make sure I took a lot of risks, but they were all very calculated risks.
Right.
I tried to make sure that I was never taking irresponsible risks.
Yeah.
Not only for myself and my family, but also for the people that I was hiring. If I take an irresponsible risk and I suddenly have to lay someone off because of it, like that's terrible.
Agreed. I think back to the story you told me about your parents, and they provided you food and shelter, which was nice. But there was an element, they expected you to figure some stuff out on your own. When you would bring people on, what did you expect of them? And to what extent did you feel that what did you owe to them in exchange for them coming to work with you? What did you have to teach them? What did you think you needed to teach them? How much space did you give them? All that stuff.
You know, I I think I owed them clear expectations. Here is what I expect from you. Here is where if it's not happening, I'm going to lose my mind. I was very clear on like expectations and clear on how I manage. You know, I think I hired people that fit into my natural management style. I'm not a micromanager, so anytime I've hired in my past somebody who needs to be micromanaged, it's a recipe for failure.
Yeah.
So I've always hired people that need more kind of guidance, keep them on the tracks, help support them. And I think that's part of what I've owed everybody as I've hired them is, I owe them support. I owe them belief and kind of whatever they need to be successful, I'm here for you. I will stay late with you. I will come in early. I'll do whatever you need, as long as you're working hard and giving 110%.
Yeah. Yeah. And you started this, your kid, how old were your kids when you started? Were they 4, 2, and what? Your youngest wasn't even born yet.
Yeah, youngest wasn't born yet. Yeah, I think Jack was 4 and 2, I think.
4 and 2. That's a risk. So your family was kind of a little bit younger than mine when I started, and that's reason enough for a lot of people to say, "Well, I can't because I've got a young family, or because I've got my wife doesn't work, or she stays home." There's all sorts of reasons, and yet you did it anyway. So as you're getting this, it's like you're trying to raise 2 young kids, soon to be 3 young kids, and get the company off the ground at the same time.
That was, but the kids were actually, I don't know why I looked at it this way. I just somehow naturally did. Like the kids were more of a motivator for me, and not motivated because like I got to make this work because of my kids. It was more, one of, when Catherine told me, shit or get off the pot, like why don't you just go do it? I also was thinking about my kids, and I was like, man, like I want my kids to see me take this chance. I don't want my kids to hear me talking about, my dreams and never actually going after them.
Right.
So even if I end up failing, like my kids will grow up knowing like, all right, dad gave it a shot.
Yep.
And I didn't want to have that personal regret. And I didn't want to ever have them see me as one of those types of people that just kind of talks about their dreams, but never goes after them.
Yep. Yep. And then
So
you
that
feel,
was kind of the motivation for me, from the perspective of my kids.
yeah, and and you want to, it gives you a reason to fight through whatever's hard, because you never want to come back and make the excuse, no matter how valid it might seem. You don't want to come back and say, I couldn't do it, or
Yeah.
even though that's possible. Even though that's possible, maybe that is possible for many people, but it's just this extra need to fight through, to work through, because you want them to learn resilience, or you want them to learn whatever adaptability, or whatever it takes to get through life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So obvious, I know Catherine encouraged you early on, and thank God for her, because I can relate, because Chrissy was the same way with me. Like, why don't you just do this and stop being a what, which is what you heard. Obviously, for those that don't know, Catherine passed away. How far into the company did that happen? And would you mind just kind of walking us through it?
Yeah, sure. It was a year after I started it.
Okay.
So July 10th, 2013, she passed away of a heart attack unexpectedly. And yeah, that's when that's when everything kind of changed for me. And obviously in a bad way from a certain perspective, but it also it gave me a lot of focus, and a lot of motivation when that happened. And having the 3 kids to juggle was that was a totally different story.
It's an amazing story. It's an amazing story. You're just like the first person I think of when I think of resilience in life. Um, I'll have to edit.
You don't have to edit this part. When when I remember when that happened for about 2 weeks, because I was blindsided. It kind of came out of nowhere. For about 2 weeks or so, I was just in a blackout. Luckily my mom came down, had some family come down, and stay with me for a little bit. But the first couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, were just a blackout.
Mm,
And I wasn't working. Uh, I was still by myself at that point.
right.
And then, but then after about 2 weeks or so, I snapped out of it and realized, like, all right, you know, this has happened.
Hmm.
Now I've got to figure out what to do next. Um,
How
and
do
that's where like the inspiration and motivation came from.
where like how do you get to a point where like when you first get that phone call? I think you said was it your father-in-law who called you that day?
Yeah, yeah, it was one night. So uh, we had we had just had my youngest Will. He was 3 months old. So she was still on maternity leave, and we had gone up to upstate New York where her family is. And we were up there. It was our anniversary. So we were up there July 3rd for our anniversary, and had an incredible anniversary night, just the two of us. And, we were staying with her family. And then I had to fly back to Boston to work. So I had gone back. I was here by myself. She was still up there with the kids. And then she went out for a run one afternoon and just collapsed. So that night, it was right around 9 o'clock. I was having dinner with a friend around the corner at their house with, my friend and his wife. And yeah, I got the call.
You
And
must you believe it? I mean, in the moment when you heard the words, were you, I mean, did it seem, it couldn't have seemed real?
no, that's one of the memories that I guess haunts me a little bit, is that the phone call, where I don't think I'll ever forget the words that he used. He just, I picked up the phone and he said, "Sean, it's Bill. Catherine's dead." And I'm like, "What?" He said, "Yeah, Catherine's dead. You got to get up here." And I think I just hung up, and it was in a bit of was in shock.
Wow.
So the next morning I flew up, and yeah,
just became real in 24 hours.
yeah.
I want to, when I went to the funeral. I saw the picture of you. I never met Katherine, full disclosure. And I met your daughter not too long ago. We were at a local sporting goods store, and my daughter and you were there, and I was there. The first time I met your daughter, and I was able to go to your son's hockey game it was about a month or two ago, although I haven't met him. But when I went to the services, that was the first time I had seen the picture of your family. So, the fact that you had three kids under the age of 5, I think, at the time. And I'm thinking, wow, this guy, he's so young, she's so young, they're so young. He's got this company. How does he pick up and go? And I remember, I just remember you waiting for everybody in the church and thanking everyone for coming. And all I wanted to do was sneak out the back door, because I'm like, I can't keep myself together. I can't do this. Like, why can't he leave? Because now I'm going to have to stand there in front of him and look like an a-hole. As time went on, I was just like, how do I reach out to you? And then I ended up reaching out to you. But what always amazed me about you, Sean, is how composed you've been throughout. What was it like interacting with the kids initially? They were so young. My guess is they probably didn't understand what was going on.
Yeah, I mean, the approach, I had an incredible grief therapist that I went to and leaned on. She was like a little angel on my shoulders the whole time.
Yeah.
She really helped guide me through everything. But I tried to be authentic with the kids, and just kind of, if I was upset, I'd be upset, and then if I wanted to cry, I'd cry in front of them.
Yeah.
Um, and in hindsight, I don't know if there was a right. I don't know if there was a right or a wrong way to handle that.
Yeah.
I just did the best I could. But I think it had me being so vulnerable in front of the kids, which I thought was the right thing, has certainly had an impact on them.
Yeah.
My oldest boy, you know, yeah, he's been impacted. He was the only one who really knew what had happened.
Yeah.
So I think when he saw me crying every day and breaking down and just being upset, he kind of locked up. So it's I don't know if there was a right way or a wrong way. I think it was just you do the best you can.
Yeah.
I feel like my kids are all great. My oldest boy is great, but it had an impact on him. How I handled that.
Yeah. I think his ability, or the fact that he was able to see you be vulnerable, will ultimately pay off for the good. And I think, had you not been able to be that way, I don't think that would have been good.
Yeah, I mean, right now I see the more negative impact that it's had on him.
Yeah.
In terms of him just kind of being emotionally locked up.
Yeah.
I think that may have just been how he handled it when he saw how upset I was. He was like, "I'm not going there." So, he locked the vault, and has been a very stoic person, and doesn't really go anywhere near anything that's kind of emotional for him. but he's still young, so
Yeah.
at some point in the future, hopefully that's something that he works on.
It's so interesting, I know how talented you are and how good with people you are, relationship skills and communication skills and your ability to maintain friendships and all that stuff that makes you so likable. It's funny, like at times, like no matter how talented we are or how gifted we might think we are, not all of it applies at home. There are times where it's like, wait a minute, I do this for a living. This shouldn't be this hard. I help people talk for a living. But
Yeah,
I think as a dad, you realize, or as a parent, you realize that each one of your kids is their own unique entity, and they
yeah,
process things in their own unique way. And there's only, nature only goes so far, nurture only goes so far. You don't know sometimes. I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying here. It's just that, sometimes
yeah.
there is no answer, I guess.
No, I think you're right, and I think with my oldest boy, he's very different than I am. I am an open book, and I am vulnerable, and I am kind of
Yeah.
I thrive on just kind of being authentic.
Yeah.
Uh, and he's built very very differently than I am. And for a number of years, I was trying to kind of get him to be more like me, and it's always been a bit of a rub between the two of us. And I think more recently I've realized, like, this is an incredible kid. Um, he's just, I got to let him be who he is, and he's an incredible kid,
Yeah.
and I don't need to shape him and mold him to be more like me and to be more vulnerable. I just need to love him and let him be who he is and help kind of nurture all the incredible things he has to bring.
Don't you think that's where the power lies, though, Sean? Is and I don't want to sound cliche, although it's going to, is in letting go. Once you realize I got to let go, and he's got to be who he's going to be,
Yeah,
and whether it's letting go and accepting that Katherine is no longer here, or letting go and saying, "Hey, Jack is who he is." You know what I mean? And that's good too.
yeah.
Um, but also, like I would think that at some level, while this is all going on, your company's still over here.
So it was still just me kind of, going into the office. I had a nanny
Okay.
who Catherine and I actually met together,
Yeah.
because she was about to go back to work. So we had a nanny who was ready. I had to call the nanny and tell her, hey, my wife passed away. Will you still please come to work? Because I really, really need you.
Wow.
So she started, I think a couple of weeks after Catherine passed away, and was with me for like 5 years, and she was incredible. We still keep in touch with her. But I basically, Ashley, my nanny, would show up at 8 o'clock. I'd leave for work, and I had an office downtown at that point.
Yeah.
Uh, and I'd get home at 6, and she'd go home, and I just she was so great. I knew that she had everything taken care of at home with the kids, and I would just go to work and focus on work, and then come home and focus on the kids and my grief and everything else.
How often were you seeing a therapist?
Once a week
Once a
for
week,
probably about 4 or 5 years.
4 or 5 years. And so was it an hour a week?
Yeah.
And in between, your family's down. Was anyone other than the nanny? Your family, Catherine's family's New York. Your family's New Jersey.
Yeah.
Did who was around? Who was around?
Uh,
Friends
it was
or
really just me and the nanny, and then you know I, I I'm lucky. I've got an incredible neighborhood. So like all the folks on my street here, would always kind of jump in and help out. For about 6 months, every night when I got home from work, there'd be like a meal waiting for me that one of the neighbors cooked.
yeah,
It was inspiring.
yeah.
It was truly. It's one of the things that helped me get through, such a dark time. Is while I was dealing with this grief and um, this tragedy, I was so inspired by the community, by my friends, by my family, by everybody.
Right.
It was powerful.
Being able to kind of let loose and be vulnerable, like you're acknowledging what happened, and at the same time appreciating humanity on as well. You could have easily gone the other way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's very easy to go the other way. But I think I'd been trained over the years by my mother, who was naturally this way, and then by Kip, who was this way around focusing on what you're grateful for.
Yeah.
And there was a ton of things that were horrible going on in my world at that point, but there was also a lot of really incredible things in my life that I had to figure out how to kind of focus on being grateful for. And I'm still that way with my kids. It's like, yeah, I feel, if maybe it sounds weird to say, but I feel like an insanely lucky person. I've got these three incredible kids. I've had this incredible life. I had 13 incredible years with Katherine. So I just choose to focus on those things versus whatever bad things happen.
I know that to be true because I've known you, and it's amazing to watch. As you got back into your routine, I'm sure those first few weeks or months, even though you're trying to be focused, I'm sure there is a little bit of a, I don't know, maybe a surreal feeling, or is this really happening feeling? Am I really running this company thing? And what kept that focus going? Was it simply appreciation and gratitude, or was it a distraction of some sort?
I think it was probably a healthy distraction.
Mm-hmm.
I made sure I was hitting my grief head on.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to ignore it. I didn't want to suppress it and tuck it down like a good Irish Catholic would normally do. So I wanted to make sure I attacked it head on.
Yeah.
So I did that. But while I was at work, I tried to just focus on work. And honestly, it's like that was fun for me. I've always enjoyed working. I really, really enjoyed building the company. It was like a fun challenge for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was like a nice, healthy, fun escape for me to be able to go to work every day. And then when I hired Janine, it became even more fun. And then hired a couple of more people, and I think we had 4 or 5 people on the team. And yeah, it became a really fun, healthy escape for me.
When did you decide that you wanted to sell it?
I mean, it was probably before I even started it. That was at the end goal. It wasn't in my mind going to happen as quickly as it did, but that was definitely down the road the end goal.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So right out of the gate, and then ultimately the end goal became a reality. You made a conscious decision to engage in conversations that led to the transaction ultimately. What's incredible to me though is and Ken Johnson, I interviewed Ken a few weeks ago. You guys met over Zoom, I don't know, maybe a
Mhm.
year ago or something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe it was a little longer. He built his company from scratch. You built your company from scratch. You built a company in the industry that I grew up in, and you and I both know a lot of the same people in that space. It's incredible to me that in a 10-year span you built something organically that most can't build half of, or maybe it's taken them 40 years to get there. Why do you think you were able to do it in 10?
I mean, once again, I think I had the good fortune of building a business that was identical to everything I'd done throughout my career. So I'd seen other people do it the right way and the wrong way, and I had learned a lot over that time. So I had a pretty good idea of like how to scale the business and how to build it so that it was sellable,
Mm-hmm.
and so that I could maximize the multiple. And I started having conversations and entertaining conversations about an acquisition probably after year 4 or so.
Oh, early.
Yeah, I remember it was probably around year 4. There was a company from Spain that I had been introduced to, and I had entertained the conversations. So I had always had conversations every year. I was having probably, I don't know, at least a couple of conversations. And every conversation I would learn a little bit more about, well, if you guys would value me at a 5x right now off EBITDA, you know, what would my company need to look like in order to be a 6 or a 7x? And I
Mm-hmm.
would just learn through every conversation, a little bit more about how I need to kind of build it and pivot.
How do you decide on your investor or your partner or whatever you want to call it? A lot of people go through this process and it's easy to pick wrong. It's easy to pick an investor who puts a nice math problem on the table for you, but at the end of the day, it's a bad marriage. What advice would you give to somebody who's contemplating the idea of selling their company when it comes to evaluating partners or investors?
I actually just had a big discussion in my YPO group about this recently, and I've got a year and a half now where I can kind of look back and reflect on everything. And I'm not sure that there is a great marriage. I don't know how many companies, who have sold, can look back and say, man, my team is so psyched about this move.
Mm.
I think I picked a good partner, but at the end of the day, it's a big company, and we had a really great boutique company, uh, and a lot of the really wonderful characteristics of that small boutique company are no longer there.
Mm.
So, yeah, I mean, I think it's easy to pick out the companies where it's going to be a bad match. Uh, I think I did the best I could to find a good match,
Mm.
for my team, and they're all still there. We lost one within a layoff, but pretty much everyone's still there. But yeah, I mean, it's a different beast, working for a big company, and I think everybody really loved working for a small company. So I'm not sure if there is a great marriage when it comes to that. And I'm not sure. I think you do the best you can to kind of find a good culture with good, honest, genuine people,
Yep.
at a company that's going to acquire you. But your team is going to have to make a decision as to whether or not this new environment and this new company is what they want.
Yeah, I've been through these myself, and I've experienced I don't know how many clients have been acquired or merged or whatever, took on a new investor over the last 10 years, but it's got to be close to 10. And the financial payoff for guys like you, women like, women in your situation, it's good. It's good. But the consequence seems to be more on the people side, where this place isn't what it used to be. And it's that whole letting go thing, letting go of what we were, or letting go of what I thought we would become,
Yeah.
uh, letting go of all those expectations that maybe you established 10 years ago, because they're gone. And I think about that, it's not a good thing or a bad thing, but when a company is acquired, it's almost like the people inside the company have to be conditioned to let go, or else they're going to hold on to what they
Yeah.
thought was going to happen. And I'm sure that it's going to be tough as the owner facilitating that transaction, knowing that this could be a likely outcome where not everybody's happy, even though nobody wants them to be unhappy.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I feel like I knew that that was going to be the outcome. And I think I did the best I could picking, like, the company that acquired Longford is a good company. It's good people with good intentions. So I think I picked a good partner.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I had 13 people at Longford when we sold, and I think if you asked every one of them, most of them, if not all of them, would say Longford was the best job they've ever had.
Mm.
We had an incredible culture. Everybody was making more money than they ever had in their career.
Mm.
So when I sold, I kind of messed up a good thing we had going, and I knew that that was the case. So that's why I say I'm not sure if if there is a perfect marriage. I think you kind of do the best you can. And I certainly went through all the questions and due diligence around, what would your plans be for my staff? You know, how do you plan to integrate in? Do you see duplication of responsibilities?
Yeah.
So you dive into all that stuff,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, you never really know.
No, I look back on all the great teams I was able to work on in my past, and I think about it, and I'm like, those people are gone. Some of them have passed away. Most of them have either gone on to start their own companies, or they've just dispersed and gotten out of the industry. And I think back on so many fun times, like those things that I experienced are never going to happen again with those people in that
Yeah.
capacity. And you just hold on to the memory of what was good, and then you move on. You try to create a new one. And I like on a football note, Every time I watch anything on the New England Patriots, I think, wow, Tom Brady's never gonna throw a football on this field again, and Bill Belichick is never gonna coach this team again. And everything that we saw for 20 years happened. It's just gone.
Yeah,
And it's got to be, you know, as the person who started the company, it's got to be, you've got to almost separate your identity from it in a lot of ways. When you go in knowing that you're going to sell it, you need to feel good that I'm still good even when I sell it. I'm proud of what we did. I wouldn't do it any differently. It's awesome, but I'm ready to let it go. It's like selling a house to somebody who wants to paint it and rip out the kitchen you just put in. You
yeah.
almost know that going in. Did you, what are your thoughts on that?
You know, I knew they didn't want to change anything. They didn't want to, rip out the kitchen I just put in. Uh, so I was comfortable with that part. At the end of the day, it became a selfish decision. Uh, and I remember talking to my team about it when I kind of announced this to them. I let them know like this is, a very selfish decision I'm choosing to make. And for the past 10 years of my life, I've got to put my three kids first, and then after my three kids, I put my entire staff, next, and I didn't really do many selfish things just for me, and this was one thing that I was going to do just for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it definitely it was just a decision that I just kind of did for me, knowing that it was a selfish one, and that it wasn't. I'm not going to say it didn't benefit like my team. I think there are good things that they've gotten out of it, but at the end of the day, they'd all be a lot happier if I had never sold. And I knew that was going to be the case.
I'm sure. But again, if you want to focus on grateful for the time together, grateful for the money earned, grateful for the experiences, and
Yeah,
capable of making whatever changes they think they need to make going forward if they want. Uh,
absolutely. And I think for me, like it was the best job I ever had. It was like that 10 years working with that whole crew was unbelievable.
right.
We all had a blast. I learned a ton. And yeah, and it was incredible. And I'm hoping that they, outside of just the money that they were able to make, I hope that they actually developed a lot and learned a lot and grew a lot, and hopefully can take all of that experience into the next chapter of their book.
How do you spend your time now? I know a little bit about it, but not everybody does. How do you spend your time now? What do you want to do next? And does it feel like you thought it would feel? So again, three questions all jumbled up. Do whatever you want with them.
All right. Uh, well, this morning I woke up. I get to drive my youngest boy to school every day, which I love. He can walk, but I choose to drive him because it's like, I don't know, it's like 4 minutes of just the two of us
Yeah.
hanging out, which is cool.
Yeah.
And then go to the gym, spend a couple hours there, and then come back and do a podcast like this. Right now I'm not really doing much of anything,
Yeah.
and kind of feels good. I'm catching up on a lot of like, just personal stuff, returning packages that I ordered on Amazon and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not really doing much, but that's kind of the boring part. So like, after 3 or 4 weeks of doing this, I got to start doing something else because I enjoy working. I need the intellectual stimulation and the challenge of like building and scaling a business.
Yes.
It is fun for me and I thrive on it. So that's part of where I'm kind of going now is I'm starting to kind of look towards, you know, how can I plug in and help companies scale and grow? And that's something that I'm really good at. So I feel like I can be a valuable resource for a lot of owners and companies, to really help them scale.
And would it matter? Would it matter what kind of company it was?
Not, I don't think it would really matter what type of business. As long as it's with an owner who really wants to grow. And there are some owners that want to grow, but they can't get out of their own way. And that probably wouldn't make sense for me to engage in anything. But yeah, I mean, I think I'll probably jump into some sort of consulting short term and,
Mhm.
tackle, helping companies scale.
Mhm.
And maybe helping them kind of put together some sort of exit strategy and help kind of build the company to scale to exit at some point.
Mhm.
And then I don't know, maybe something will come around where I can start something up and tackle that again.
So does it feel like you thought it would feel? If you started the company to sell the company, you've already sold it now. You must have had a thought as to what it might feel like building something and selling something, right? When you first started?
When I first started, I always had this thought in my head of me and Catherine having a drink, and so
Yeah,
that part never panned out.
right.
But then after that had happened, I started to kind of have a different thought in my head of, I'd be sitting in a room. I had a bottle of Johnny Walker Blue that had her name engraved on it. And I bought it probably like 8 or 9 years ago after she died. And I always had this thought like, all right, I'm going to be sitting in a room somewhere and I'm going to sign on the dotted line and it's all going to be done and the wire transfer will go through. And I'll finally open up that bottle after all those years and pour myself a glass of scotch, and I ended up doing that. It was 9 o'clock in the morning, but tasted good.
I'm trying to think. I want to ask you 1,000 more questions, but I know you've got it's been an hour, but I just want to ask you a couple more. What
Go for it.
is anything that you've learned along the way that you really believe people ought to know? And even if they don't become you, it's not about becoming you, but if you were to give something to them on your way out the door, what would you want them to know?
I'd say from a personal perspective, I've met a lot of people that have had a lot of things go wrong in their lives and a lot of tragic loss and everything. And everyone's life is different, some more challenging than others. But I always get inspired by people that just choose to focus on what they're grateful for and the good things that they have in their lives, regardless of the tragedy. And I think that's like a way of living that I've adopted. That's really saved my life, and I think that's a valuable. You think about like finding happiness. I feel like that's the key. It's just waking up in the morning and being grateful for all the incredible things you have in your life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
From a professional standpoint, I definitely, I was very lucky to kind of have some great mentors, and I met a lot of people, and I was always kind of trying to learn and ask questions and just soak things up from them. And looking back, I did a really, really good job, I think, of just over the course of that 10 years, every year throughout I was pivoting to build the business so that it was sellable, and I think a lot of people will build a business and then they get a little closer to retirement age and they're like, all right, I think I want to market my business, time to exit. And they realize I haven't really built it the right way.
Mm.
And now I want to sell it. And it's a heavy lift to kind of restructure everything and rebuild it so that it's actually more of a sellable business.
Mm.
So I think figuring out long before you're ready to exit, am I building it the right way? Assuming that's your plan to exit, am I building it the right way? And what I've been kind of sharing with some folks lately is that, you may as well build it to sell. Like I built it to sell. We had an incredible culture. People were making a lot of money. Everyone was happy. We were all friends. It was great. So we had this incredible culture, and it was ready to sell at any point. And maybe I didn't sell it. Maybe I ended up keeping it for another 20 years and passing it down to my kids. But because of the way I had built it over the years, I had that option. And when an opportunity presented itself, I was able to capitalize on it.
What about advice to the industry in general? I'm pretty critical of the staffing industry. I grew
You
up
hate it.
I get frustrated with it. I really do. I get frustrated with it because I see relationships eroding and technology being sold as, hey, this is the way you build relationships now. And by the way, I use all the technology, but I don't know that it's being used right. And I don't necessarily believe that relationships are at the levels that they could or should be.
Yeah.
What's your take on that? You don't have to agree with me.
Yeah. I agree with you that we have a highly dysfunctional industry, the staffing industry. I love it that way. I say let it stay that way because it creates a ton of opportunity for the few people that will do it the right way.
It's true.
So, yeah, I say leave it that way. Bring in
Well,
more people that stink at what they do. And
Okay, fair enough. Well, I mean, as going back, putting myself back in the industry, I loved the dysfunction for the same reasons. No competition. Most people don't get it. That made it
Yeah.
easy. But if you want to be good, if you want to be good, if you really care, and maybe you need to get out of your own way, or you've got to fix something, what advice would you give to somebody who needs to build stronger relationships but hasn't accepted that as the truth yet?
Yeah, so I think we live in a world where, you expect immediate gratification because in most aspects of our lives we get it. Um, and there are a few things in life where you cannot get things immediately. You cannot feel that gratification immediately. Building relationships, falling in love. These things take time. They take patience. And I think especially the younger generations are so hardwired to just kind of expect something immediately. And I think when it comes to your career, especially if you're in any kind of sales and or role where you're building relationships, which, let's be honest, is most careers, right? Most careers revolve around your ability to build healthy, meaningful relationships. It takes patience, and you've got to be able to kind of understand that. And same with building a relationship with like a boyfriend or girlfriend. It takes patience.
Agreed. What's something that I haven't asked you that you want to say, or is there anything that you'd like people to know before we wrap it up? I'll give you the last word.
Oh man, I can't think of anything. I think we've covered a lot here.
Well, I didn't get your height or your weight. Let's get into that.
Why don't we go with 6'4"?
Well, just anything. I mean, what if people want to get in touch with you? What if people are curious about learning more? What if somebody has a business opportunity and they want to talk to you about it?
Yeah, so reach out to me on LinkedIn. Obviously, that's the best way to connect with me and get a hold of me. I'd be happy to talk with anybody, whether it's about a business opportunity or just to kind of chit chat and get to know you. But yeah, I mean, I guess stay tuned. I'm gonna be figuring out kind of what I'm gonna be doing next and where I can plug in, and stay tuned. I'll start to update my LinkedIn profile and kind of let everybody know what I'm doing.
Excellent. You'll come on again if I ask you to come on again?
No,
No.
I did.
The answer is no.
And watch you cry? No, we're not going through this again.
I'm editing that out.
I told you one time.
Thank you, Sean. It was awesome talking to you.
You bet, Dave. Take care, bud.
Okay.